Welcome everyone to our new video podcast episode. This series is part of the preparation for the Health, AI, and Gamification Hackathon, or in short, HI. It's taking place at the ACM Multimedia 2025 conference in Dublin. We're creating these talks to help all of you gear up for this exciting 48-hour event, where we'll be crafting innovative games to address global health challenges using multimodal AI. If you're hearing of this event the first time, please check out our webpage and our Discord server. We'd love to have you there.
Hi everyone. I'm Mathias Lux, a professor at University of Klagenfurt, where my work focuses on multimedia and games, and I'll be the host for this episode. Today we're talking about how to start with game development. We have a special guest, somebody who is working on games and the use of AI in games. So welcome, Tom. Please, can you say a few words about yourself?
Thanks for having me. I'm Tom. I'm a PhD student at the University of Klagenfurt. I graduated doing games in game studies and engineering at the same university. And currently I'm doing research about how to use AI in video games, but in serious contexts, which might be a little bit different than what we're doing. But nonetheless, I also made a lot of games for fun reasons, so I know how it works.
Fantastic to have you here, Tom. And serious games is something that, of course, relates to health. And
that is true.
Also the AI topic is serious in many dimensions. So our take on approaching the hackathon is, of course, from the side of games. So we go into game development. We're not working a lot with health data or AI on a base level, but we're using it. So what we want to do is we want to focus on how to turn your idea into a playable prototype that could tackle a real world problem. Okay, so let's dive right in. Tom, what's a good starting point for game development? If you know nothing, where do you start?
Well, if you know nothing, first you need an idea. Whether that's at a hackathon, at a game jam, or wherever you are, if you want to make a game first, you need to come up with an idea. And you usually start writing down what you think the game would be. You can start writing on paper, you can start writing on your PC, but you need to communicate, and usually you'll be working in a team as well, right? So the whole team needs to be on the same page.
Awesome. And what game should I look forward to? The first game should be something like Elder Scrolls or...
Yeah, exactly. Just go for World of Warcraft right off the bat. I think that's a good idea. Yeah, you need to keep it as small and simple as possible. And whatever the first thought you have, you need to reduce it once, then sketch it out again, and then cut off some features again, because most likely you will be overscoping way too much on your first attempt.
Okay, any games we should look at? Any tips from the top of your head?
I mean, I would always consider going for the classics as a starting point, like you have Pong, Pac-Man, these kinds of classic, simple games that you can technically program in like very little time if you know how to do it. Even then, like implementation shouldn't be too difficult. Then you can start adding features, your special ideas on top of that.
Awesome. I just want to drop a name here because I know you liked it and played it a lot. Brotato is, for instance, such a game, I think.
Yes.
We have a very easy game loop. It's just shoot stuff, and then you get a power up, and then you can shoot more stuff and so on.
Yes. It's like this whole genre of survivors games, starting with Vampire Survivors and Brotato. It's the input is very simple. You basically just have movement directions, and then you pick whichever upgrade you want, and you become stronger and stronger. It's a very simple game loop. And speaking of game loops, I think it's also really important to think about what you want your players or your users to do over and over again. This will then be the game loop, and most likely it will be repeating.
Yeah, so we have these repeating game loops with a small idea. That's a crucial point. And for implementing that, any tips in what software we should look into? What is good for a beginner? What is good for great projects? What is the best game engine? No,
what is the best game engine? It's difficult, yeah, because most likely people who come here to work on the games already have some kind of experience in certain programming languages or even engines. And depending on that, chances are that there is something that is easier for you to use. For example, if you know Python, then there is RenPy, which uses Python, for example. If you know C#, then there is Unity, which has C# support. I think Godot also has C# support, but it mainly uses its own language. Then there is more extreme engines like Unreal, which I would definitely not recommend in the scope of this because it's just way too much. So I would stick to the more simple ones. The highest recommendation goes to Godot. It's completely open source and somewhat easy to learn. There's lots of good online resources to learn about Godot. There is Unity, which is, I think, the classic 2D, 3D game engine, but there's also some controversy around it. And then if you want to go for narrative games, so like games that are more about a story, more about text, then there's also some different recommendations like RenPy that I mentioned already, which is like a visual novel engine, or alternatively, Twine is super accessible, even if you don't know much about how to code. You can use it in your browser and you basically get a text-based game with hyperlinks. You get an HTML as output that you can very easily also share with other people. And you can have pictures and stuff in it as well.
Nice. And as I'm old, I'll just top off your list with the retro game engines. So if you like the whole idea of having a C64 video game or an old Amiga or something like that, there are retro engines like Bitsy, which is specifically for creating these pixel adventures with multiple rooms, or TIC80 or Pico 8, where you have a virtual old arcade machine which you can program, and there's not a lot of graphics, not a lot of sound, but very well-made games are available for those. If you want to try out what you can do with those engines, they are hugely popular in the open source and indie scene. And you can, for instance, take a look at itch.io, where you can try and figure out what the limits of those engines are. How to go about assets, art and sound. Any ideas what we can do if we are not pros in game development?
Yeah, I mean, chances are that because this is an AI-based hackathon, that you can also, to some extent, use generated assets if you so want. But usually it's recommended to use existing assets, and you can get them from different sources. And most of them also have like open rights, like, for example, CC0, which means that you can use them even without credit where you got them from. You mentioned itch.io, which I think is definitely important to look at if you want to join this hackathon at all, because this is also where the submissions most likely will take place. It's a website where you can upload video games, tools, and assets, and you can also, if they are compatible, play them or see them directly in the browser. Another suggestion would be Kenny, right? Kenny.
Yeah, I think it's Kenny. Yeah, Kenny with EY at the end.
Yeah. We'll put it in the show notes, as you said.
Yes, that's where it goes.
Same as with all the other resources, I suppose. But yeah, Kenny has like really high quality game assets, both 2D and 3D, that are very easy to use in your game. You just unzip them and you basically can put them together and have something ready in like 10 minutes.
Yeah, and of course you can use simple rectangles or circles or something like that. Think of Geometry Wars, which was one of the famous twin stick shooters, a little bit older, but they mostly used particle effects and shattering basic shapes.
Yes, basic shapes always work. There are games that prove that they even work on like a narrative level, like Thomas Was Alone, right?
Yes.
And you can always start with shapes and replace them later with sprites or 3D models if you want. But starting prototyping with shapes is always a good idea.
Speaking of Thomas Was Alone, we'll put the link in the show notes. It's a game. It's not about Tom. Okay, what skills do we need for developing game? That's also something that our students actually ask when they come to Klagenfurt. They say, I want to start making games. I can draw 2D on paper. What skills do I need to develop? What skills do I need to have in a team?
Yeah. So bottom line, the first thing I always like to say to students who ask this is that whatever skill you have, chances are you can use it when making a game, because games are so multifaceted that they can incorporate almost anything, you know? And if you're very skilled at, I don't know, doing medical diagnosis or whatever, you can also incorporate this into a game on a mechanical level, on a narrative level. There's multiple ways to do it always. But other than that, there's always a couple of core skills that you need if you want to make a game. And the first one is usually programming. So you need somebody who can work with the engine that you're using. You need somebody to code and implement the features. Then you usually need somebody to create or be responsible for the assets. So an artist, usually both for visual and for audio. Audio is then also usually the sound designer. And you need game designers. Those are the ones who are responsible for designing the game loop, how it's supposed to be played, how the systems work and interact with each other. And they will also be responsible then for telling the developers directly what to do. These are like the core roles, I would say, but usually it works that depending on how many people you have, each person will do multiple things, right?
Yeah, People can wear many hats. I totally agree. We went directly from the skills to the roles in the group, in the team. So that's pretty awesome. So we already described the core roles. One thing I always tell people is you need to be more organized with the play tests. So what I want to add here as a role as a playtest manager, it might not be a 24/7 job, but somebody who takes notes on who tested the game, what went wrong, what went well, what is there to change, what is there up to discussion and whatnot.
Yeah, it's really important, and it often falls short during jams and hackathon to actually have other people test it. It's not enough if just the people in the team test it, because eventually they'll get blindsided and know everything already. So you need new fresh blood, to come and take a look at it so you can get feedback that you can actually use.
Nice. Okay, let's talk about the game loop a little bit more. We typically teach in Klagenfurt that games are not here to just convey fun and entertainment, but that games are actually able to give you an interactive experience. So to experience situations that you could not experience otherwise, like whatever, jumping from the stratosphere, skydiving, climbing the highest mountain on earth, things you may not be able to achieve right now, but games can do that for you. What is the connection to the core gameplay loop from this experience to the loop?
I mean, the loop is basically whatever you want your players to do over and over again, what experience you want them to engage in. It's important to think of what you want your players to feel, what you want them to experience, and then depending on that, you will be able to design your core gameplay loop. I'm not sure if this is exactly what you meant.
No, absolutely. The core loop is the main experience, and it should be simple, and it should be engaging, and it should convey the experience that people should experience in the game. If they need to tend to a field to get the crops, then the main game loop is watering the crops, and then the reward might be selling it on the market.
Yeah, and then buying more crops with the money you got. And that's how it loops back to the start.
Yeah.
And same
Awesome.
If you think of Tetris or any older game like this, you always have the simplest loop is just a block falling down, checking if there's a filled row, clearing that row if it's the case, and then restarting the loop. And that's the whole thing, right? So the loop can be very, very simple and short. Yeah,
in this case, it's in arcade games. So the loop gets faster and faster, and the game gets harder and harder.
Yeah, that's often the case.
Okay, so where do we define the loop? That's just a hint. I know it, but I want to keep the conversation going. So where do we define the loop so that the team can agree on what is there to implement?
So I guess you're pointing towards like a game design document, or at least a one-pager of sorts, which is usually used to document what you want to do so that everyone can be on the same page. So in the context of like a short hackathon like this, I would recommend keeping it in a one-page document, like we call it the one-pager usually. But of course, it doesn't have to be exactly one page. And you can just use something like Google Docs or some kind of collaborative writing tool so that everyone can write down their thoughts or comment if they want something changed. And this should usually be done very early on in development. Otherwise, people will start working on things that are then in the end not necessary or cannot be implemented. That's always unfortunate.
Yeah, that leads to one of my most favorite problems you have in game development, because it has the word creep in there, the feature creep. And actually, the feature creep is defined by things you implement, which you didn't want to implement, and just stop or redirect your whole progress to do. And while this might be a good creative tool, it's a little bit a bad idea when you do it in a 48-hour hackathon or game jam. And the game concept can avoid this feature creep, because then people are on the same page, the one-page document. And if a new feature needs to be implemented, then this is the base for discussion. You, all of you revisit the document, and if it fits in, write in the document, implement it.
Yes, and I think like all of us, whenever we create something, we have ideas while we're making it on how to make it better, like what is still missing and things like that. And sometimes you can get sidetracked very easily implementing some kind of authentication functionality for your game that is not necessary at all, but it took you 6 hours and you're very proud of it. But in the end, it doesn't add anything to it, right? So it's really important to prioritize the things that make the game work. I think you, Matthias, actually always mentioned this 80-20 rule. Maybe you can explain it.
Yes, absolutely. So, thank you for pointing that out. I didn't put it in my notes for this episode. I don't know why. Maybe I just did the 20% necessary. The 80-20 rule is that with 20% of the effort, if you have a project and you went from 0 to 100, with 20% of the effort, you can actually make 80% of the project work. And the rest of the effort, the rest of the 80% effort, go into 20% of the final product. So for a hackathon or a game jam, make sure to find and identify those 20% of effort that go into 80% of the product, because an 80% product is always good as a result of a game jam or hackathon, because then you have something to show and something to test, which totally leads me to the minimum viable product. Tom, do you want to say something about the minimum viable product?
Yeah, I mean, I think most people who work in this field know the idea of the MVP, the minimum viable product. It's whatever has the core features that you really need to have it working. And this is what you should focus on working towards as quickly as possible. And in general, during a 48-hour game jam or hackathon, you should be done with the MVP during the first 24 hours. And the second 24 hours should then usually be used for testing, improving, polishing.
Yeah, and it's very important to see the minimum and viable in there, because another approach would be to go for a vertical slice, which means that you have a fully featured game, but only a temporal slice of it. So you play first half of the first level and get the full experience out of that. And this is a huge effort, actually. So many game studios are steering away from the vertical slice because it's a huge effort. And if you have to throw it away, you did a lot of work that you actually wouldn't need. So an MVP is most likely a better idea for a hackathon. Awesome. I also noted down the beat chart. I totally like the beat chart, so I want to say it. So that's also a tool I can use for managing feature creep, because sometimes people just throw in everything in the first level. So say you make a jump and run like game and you have planned multiple levels, and then you come in and say, we need this monster in the first level, and we need this barricade in this level, and this hazard in the level, and then the environment should change in the level, and we need 3 different types of plants, and you have 20,000 coins there and whatever. And all those ideas creep into the first level, and then you have an overcrowded first level, and nobody can cope with it. You're totally missing out on the tutorial. Players are lost. They don't know what to do. Too many options. And the beat chart helps you with that. What you do is you define columns, and each column is a level. And you start with the first level, which would be the basic tutorial, moving, organizing your inventory, if it's a game that needs the inventory, or setting the story, if it's a narrative game. And then second level would be the first level where they play. That would be the first challenge, maybe a hazard. You have to overcome an obstacle or something like that. Then the third level would focus on first enemies. Then next one would be a horde of enemies. Next one would be a boss enemy or something like that. Or you mix and match. You can also balance the game economy in there. Say you get 3 coins in the first level, 5 in the second level. And that would allow you to buy whatever, 3 arrows and 1 sword or something like that. So it's a good idea to plan this, like what's the beat, the heartbeat of the game, and what comes in when, which feature is presented to the player at what time. That's also very good.
Yeah, I also really like it. I think it's way underused. But if you think of narrative games, you mentioned them as well. Usually when you write a story, you have some kind of story flowchart or grow or curve or whatever you want to call it, right? And you have certain beats in it, if you will, like conflict and resolution, some adversities that people have to face and how they deal with it and how they learn from it and grow from it, some kind of character growth and things like that. You can basically put on this beat chart as well for like emotional beats for players if you want in a narrative game. But it works literally the same for game mechanics and the experience you want people to have when playing your games. Like you want people to experience this and that many coins, like you said, for example, during the first level, and then later on they can get more and more coins to become richer and richer and have this experience of having more.
Nice. Yeah, I actually didn't relate it to narrative games, but that's a very good point. And the cool part with the beat chart is that you can have in the rows the different dimensions like narrative or encounters or decisions, micro and macro decisions and stuff like that. And the columns would then give you the levels. Okay, let's try to steer back a little bit to the hackathon theme of AI and health in games. So what would be options that we can consider for combining AI, health, and games?
Well, I can talk from the point of AI at the very least and not so much about the point of health. So maybe you have more ideas there. But with AI, like everyone knows ChatGPT, LLMs are like the big thing right now. And there is many LLMs that can run locally or on a local server that you can access. They're smaller models, so they're not as good as ChatGPT, but they're really easy to implement in your games usually. And then you can just communicate with them and have them output text. And the cool thing about the text is that it's dynamically created. So it's different for every player, for example. And I think implementing something like this can create really creative games.
Nice. Yeah, I'm a little bit into fitness. I'm a huge fan of quantified self with my sports watch and everything. So I could immediately think of a gamified assistant that helps me with my fitness efforts. Something like, oh my God, this was a far too long hike. And how can I power up my fitness to be able to walk for 12 hours? Give me a training plan or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
It would be cool to have something engaging, like when you go there and they ask you, how did you feel about it? Instead of all these forms putting in my muscles are aching or something like that, which they all have, like Suunto, Polar, Garmin, whatever they're all called, but it's not very much of a game there. Also, what's really great, I think, is the content you have for health. So the World Health Organization, many other huge organizations give away the health data. And with LLMs, we can actually use that data instead of just searching for it and then presenting it to the people. We can frame it in a different environment. And this different environment might be a game, mental health issues or eating disorders or something like that, that you find out about them earlier. And then the game is able to direct you to professional help. That would be a very serious issue, of course. And the ethical problem that you get a game telling you when to go to the doctor. But yeah, maybe that's a good idea to venture forward into that direction. So digitalization in personal health.
Yeah. And I think it's great that you mentioned mental health because it counts as health as well, after all. Just having this option of talking to somebody in real time within a game can also be helpful for mental health. Like talking with an LLM can help. But there are a lot of issues, like you mentioned, especially ethical ones. And also, if you start communication with a web server, then using this data in any way is usually also of ethical issues. So there is a lot to think about. And I don't want people to forget about potential ethical problems when they develop their games.
Yeah, so keep in mind that this is, of course, a thing that we have to consider. For the hackathon, we can definitely venture out and try what's working and what's not. But for publishing results afterwards, an ethical consideration of the implied use of the technology and the data is definitely a thing we have to consider. Okay, so awesome. I think there was a lot of information in there. I think we're missing out on the links. We didn't spell it into the microphone, but we'll put them in the show notes. Tom, any idea? How can we summarize what we or give you the key takeaways to the audience?
I mean, key takeaways are basically find your team. You will probably need to fulfill multiple roles, so be ready for that. Brainstorm at the start early and write down what you want to do. Define your core game loop, define your minimum viable prototype, and also like which technologies you want to use. Like, do you want to use LLMs? We also have image generation as an option. We also have audio generation, like text to speech or speech to text. So there are many options of how to use various AI models. And you need to define what you want to use early and work towards that. Avoid feature creep, easy to say, difficult to do, and get feedback from players. Those are, I think, the most important things.
Yeah, I'll just top it up with utilize the skills you have. That's something Tom said earlier. So every skill, each and every skill is really valuable for game development or hackathons, be it social skills, programming, art skills, whatever. Know what you can do or what your team can do and use them accordingly. And if you want to go into a specific technology, then think ahead and try it out. If everybody wants to install Unity in the first hour of a 48-hour game jam, well, that will not work, as always.
Yes, so this is also something I think is important to mention. A game jam is not a place where you learn new skills. You should use what you already know. You can learn ahead of time in preparation for the hackathon, for example. We will provide the resources and you can look at them. You can go through the tutorials and learn the thing. But you should not start with those tutorials because you will stress out and it will not be fun that way. I think it's much easier to go into it if you already have the skill set that you need, or at least part of it, because you will be working in a team, like we said, most likely. And then you can also always rely on other people filling up the skills that you personally don't have.
Yes, that is absolutely true. So I have written down a final sentence of the key to success is preparation. So the time that you invest now, like listening to this podcast, checking out tutorials on game engines, thinking ahead of what technologies you can include, how those APIs might work together, that is the time that saves your mind at the game jam or at the hackathon. That's actually the skill you can then rely on. And that doesn't mean that you cannot do art if you're a programmer artist, what we call. That's a very nice word for bad artist. Still, many games exist that have programmer art inside and are still great games. But to develop the skill of doing programmer's art, that you should do before. So don't go there and try to install a driver for your pen tablet. You should have done that before. Great. Thank you so much, Tom, for joining in. It's always better to have an expert here. Do you have any final words, Tom?
Well, thanks so much for having me. I really hope that people can join and enjoy this hackathon. Even if it's like your first time joining, I think it's a great opportunity. The last thing I really want to stress, maybe for people who don't have experiences with hackathons or game jams, is take care of yourself and your mental health. It's very easy to fall into a pattern of, okay, I don't need sleep, I need to work. This is not a good idea in general. So please try to take care of yourself.
It's absolutely right. Thank you for pointing that out. It's amazing how much you can get done in crunch time, like in 48 hours, but it's also amazing how much you can strain yourself in those 48 hours. So take care of yourself. Try it out if you've never done it before. A hackathon or a game jam are awesome experiences. If you don't like it, don't do any other again. But actually 80% of the people we're back at the 2080 rule. 80% of the people really like it and revisit game jams and hackathons. So thank you all for tuning in. Get tinkering, start learning. And Tom and me will both be in Dublin, taking part at the game jam and hackathon, organizing stuff, coding and doing programmer art and whatever, or programmer music. So we'll see you in Dublin. Bye.
We love feedback. Please give us your thoughts on this podcast. We want to make these prep talks as helpful as possible. If you want to ask questions, find a team, or connect with mentors, please join our Discord server. The link is in the show notes below. You can also find more information on the official ACM Multimedia 2025 Hackathon webpage.